Frame narrative, Montana, December 1905. The firelight cast dancing shadows across the walls of the great ranch house, painting memories in gold and amber. Tom Brennan, 72 years old now, sat in his worn leather chair beside the stone hearth. His hands, gnarled and scarred from a lifetime of hard work, moved with practiced precision across the whetstone, sharpening a straight razor. The rhythmic sound filled the quiet evening like a meditation, like a prayer. His grandson, Samuel Jr., 10 years old and full of questions, sat cross-legged on the rug nearby. The boy's eyes kept drifting to the old blue scarf hanging on the mantel above the fire. It was faded now, threadbare in places, but still carefully preserved behind glass. "Grandpa," Samuel Jr. said finally, unable to contain his curiosity any longer, "why do you always keep that old scarf up there? Grandma says it's more important to you than anything else in this house." Tom's hands paused on the razor. He looked up at the scarf, and for a moment his weathered face softened with something that might have been pain or might have been love. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes, not after all these years. "That belonged to a man named Samuel Hart," Tom said quietly. "Your great uncle, the man you were named after." The boy's eyes widened. "I have a great uncle. Is he still alive?" "No, son. He died a long time ago. Before you were born. Before your mother was born. Before any of this." Tom gestured around at the comfortable house, the ranch visible through the windows, the life they had built here. "He died in Virginia in 1864, in a place called the Wilderness. He took a bullet that was meant for me." Samuel Jr. processed this with the seriousness children sometimes have when confronted with death. "He saved your life?" "He did. And in doing so, he gave me something I didn't deserve and couldn't repay." Tom set down the razor and looked directly at his grandson. "He gave me your grandmother, your mother, this ranch, this family. Everything you see around you exists because of what Samuel Hart did on a battlefield 41 years ago." The boy moved closer, settling at Tom's feet. "Will you tell me the story?" Tom reached for the glass of whiskey on the side table, took a small sip, and stared into the fire. The flames reminded him of another fire in another time, when his world had been nothing but ash and emptiness. "It's not an easy story," Tom warned. "Parts of it are dark. Parts of it might give you nightmares." "I'm not afraid," Tom smiled faintly. "No, I suppose you're not. You've got your mother's courage, and she got it from her mother, and her mother got it from somewhere deeper than blood can reach." He settled back in his chair, and his voice took on the cadence of memory, of things long buried but never forgotten. "Let me tell you about the winter of 1873. I was 40 years old then. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd already lived the only parts worth living, and all that remained was waiting to die. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. I didn't know that on a night when the wind howled like a wounded animal and the snow fell thick enough to bury a man standing upright, my real life would finally begin." Tom closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, it was as if he were no longer in the warm ranch house but back in that small cabin, in that endless winter, surrounded by ghosts. "It started with a promise I couldn't keep." Montana Territory, December 1873. The hammer came down hard. Once, twice, 3 times. Tom Brennan drove the last nail into the pine coffin and stepped back, his breath fogging in the frigid air of his workshop. His hands, calloused and scarred from 8 years of this work, moved automatically now. Muscle memory, the body's way of protecting the mind from having to think too much about what it was building. Another box for the dead. The 4th one this month. Tom ran his palm along the coffin's edge, checking for rough spots that might snag on cloth or skin. The wood was smooth. Perfect. He'd learned long ago that if you were going to do something, even something as grim as building boxes for corpses, you did it right. You did it with care. You gave the dead at least that much dignity. "What do you think, Sergeant?" Tom glanced at the old hound curled by the coal stove. "Reckon old Miller will appreciate the craftsmanship?" The dog lifted his graying head. His tail thumped once against the floor, a half-hearted gesture of solidarity. "Yeah," Tom muttered, turning back to his work. "I don't suppose he will. Dead men ain't particular about their accommodations." He crossed to the window and scraped frost from the glass with his thumbnail. Outside, the Montana sky hung low and heavy, the color of old bruises, the kind of sky that promised snow. Lots of it. The wind had been building since noon, rattling the workshop walls, howling through gaps in the timber like something hungry trying to get in. "Storm coming," Tom said to no one, to Sergeant, to the empty room, to the ghost that never quite left him alone. "Bad one." The dog whined softly as if in agreement. Tom checked his supplies with the methodical precision of a man who'd learned that survival often came down to preparation. Firewood, enough for 3 days if he was careful. Food, salt pork, beans, a bit of cornmeal, enough for maybe a week. Whiskey, half a bottle, kept not for pleasure but for the nightmares that still came most nights, even at 8 years after Appomattox. 8 years since the war ended in 1865. 9 years since Samuel Hart died in his arms at the Wilderness in May 1864. 9 years since he'd made a promise he couldn't keep. Tom pulled on his coat, preparing to bring in more wood before the storm hit full force. His hand was on the door latch when he paused, looking back at the coffin he'd just finished. It was good work, solid joinery, dovetail corners that would hold for decades, longer than anyone would be around to care. 247 coffins in 8 years. That's what his life had become. Not a builder of homes or furniture or children's toys. A builder of boxes for the dead. Because somehow working with death every day made it easier to avoid thinking about living. Tom opened the door. The wind hit him like a fist, driving ice crystals into his face. He squinted against the assault and reached for the woodpile. His fingers had just closed around a split log when he froze. Something was moving out there in the gathering storm. No, two things, two shapes, small, struggling, coming toward him through the white chaos. Tom's hand went instinctively to the pistol at his belt. Old habits from the war. Always check your weapon. Always know your exits. Always be ready for whatever darkness the world decided to throw at you next. But these shapes weren't threats, or at least they weren't the kind you could shoot. The first one reached him before he could react. A child. Couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her coat was thin, torn at the elbows. Her boots were split, and her lips had gone the color of bruised plums. But her eyes, Lord, her eyes burned with something that had no business being in a child so young. Determination, desperation, the kind of fire that only came from having nothing left to lose. "Please, sir." Her voice came out in broken gasps. "Please. My mama, she fell. She can't get up no more." Tom didn't wait for her to finish. He pushed past her, wading through knee-deep snow toward the second figure. A woman, face down, dark hair spread across the white ground like spilled ink. Blood. He could see blood, bright red against the snow, spreading from somewhere beneath her body. "Help me turn her," Tom called to the child. The little girl was already there, her frozen fingers gripping her mother's shoulder. Together they rolled the woman onto her back. Tom's breath caught. Those eyes. He'd seen them before, watched them close forever on a battlefield 8 years ago. "Mister?" The child tugged his sleeve. "Mister, is Mama going to die?" The question snapped Tom back. He shook his head hard, dispelling the ghosts. This woman wasn't Samuel. She was someone who needed help. Someone who would be if he didn't move. Now. "Not tonight, she ain't," Tom growled. He scooped the woman into his arms. She weighed nothing. Like a bird. Like something already half gone from this world. "Follow me," he barked at the girl. "Quick now!" The child obeyed without question, her small legs churning through the snow behind him. Tom carried the woman to his cabin and kicked the door open. The warmth inside hit them like a wall. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, and turned to the girl. "Lantern," he said, pointing. "On the table. Light it." She moved fast, her frozen fingers fumbling with the matches. One struck. 2. 3. The wick caught and warm light flooded the small room. Tom got his first real look at the woman. Young, mid-30s maybe. Pretty once, probably, before hunger and fear had carved her down to bone and shadow. Her dress was torn, her face was gaunt, and on her neck, just visible above her collar, were the unmistakable marks of fingers pressed too hard. Bruises, old ones faded to yellow-green, and newer ones, purple-black, layered on top. Tom's jaw tightened. He'd seen marks like that before. On women in the South after the war. On camp followers who'd made bad choices about which soldiers to trust. Marks that spoke of violence and control and the particular kind of cruelty that came when someone decided another human being was property. "Where's she hurt?" Tom asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Her ankle," the child said. Her voice was steady, too steady for a girl her age. "She heard it snap 3 days ago. We've been walking ever since." 3 days. 3 days on a broken ankle. Tom carefully removed the woman's ruined boot. What he found made him curse under his breath. The ankle was grotesquely swollen, the bone clearly out of alignment. Worse, red streaks were starting to climb up from the injury. Infection. If it spread much further, she'd lose the leg. Or her life. "Dear God," Tom whispered. "Mama said we couldn't stop," the girl continued, her voice taking on a mechanical quality, like she was reciting something she'd memorized. "She said if we stopped, he'd find us. The bad man. She said he'd kill anyone who helped us. She said it was better to die in the snow than let him catch us." Tom looked up sharply. "Who's the bad man?" The girl's face went white, her lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Tom decided not to push. Not yet. There would be time for questions later. If any of them lived through the night. He turned his attention back to the woman. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. For a moment she stared at the ceiling, trying to remember where she was. Then her whole body went rigid. "Rose?" Her hands shot out, grabbing at empty air. "Where's Rose? Where's my daughter?" "I'm here, Mama." The child, Rose, pressed her mother's hand to her cheek. "I'm right here. We're safe. This man helped us." The woman's head turned. Her eyes found Tom's face. And in that moment, he saw everything. Fear, suspicion, desperate calculation. She was measuring him, assessing the threat, planning her next move even as she lay broken and bleeding in a stranger's bed. This was a woman who'd learned the hard way that men were dangerous, that kindness was often a trap, that survival meant staying 3 steps ahead of everyone around you. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "Tom Brennan. You're in my cabin. You collapsed outside. That ankle needs setting, and it needs it now. We need to leave." She tried to sit up and immediately cried out, her face going gray with pain. "You ain't going nowhere." Tom pressed her shoulder firmly back against the pillow. "Not with that ankle. You'd make it maybe 20 yards before you collapsed again. And next time, neither of you would get back up." "You don't understand." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Real tears. The kind that came from a well that had been dry for too long and was finally overflowing. "If he finds us here, if Victor finds us, he'll kill you. He'll kill anyone who helps us. We can't stay. We can't." "Mama, stop." Rose's voice cut through her mother's panic. "We can't go back out there. You know we can't." The woman, Catherine Abigail, whatever her name was, squeezed her eyes shut. A sob broke from her throat, raw and terrible. The sound of someone who'd been fighting too long and didn't have anything left. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't keep running. I can't." Tom let her cry. Sometimes that was all you could do, let the breaking happen so the healing could start. He'd learned that after the war when he'd spent 3 months in a veterans hospital, surrounded by men who screamed in their sleep and wept when they thought no one was watching. When her sobs finally quieted to ragged breathing, Tom spoke again. His voice was calm, steady, the voice he'd used to talk down panicked soldiers when the bullets were flying. "Listen to me. I'm going to set your ankle and feed you both a hot meal. In the morning, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. But right now in this storm, leaving means dying. And I don't think you brought your girl this far just to freeze to death 20 yards from shelter." The woman stared at him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face, some calculation of honesty or exhaustion or just too much pain to argue anymore, seemed to satisfy her. The tension in her shoulders eased just slightly. "One night," she said finally. "That's all." "One night," Tom agreed. Though even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Whatever darkness was chasing this woman and her child, whatever bad man had put those bruises on her neck and that fear in her eyes, it wasn't going to be solved in one night. He turned to Rose. The girl stood there watching him with those ancient, knowing eyes. Eyes that had seen too much, understood too much. What's your name, child? Rose. Rose Morrison. Well, Rose Morrison, can you help your mama? Hold her hand while I fix her ankle. Rose nodded and climbed onto the bed without hesitation. She was used to this, used to being the calm one, the strong one, the one who held things together when the adults fell apart. No 7-year-old should be that competent in a crisis. It spoke of trauma, of a childhood spent learning to be silent, to be helpful, to disappear when necessary. Tom gathered his supplies. He'd done this before during the war. Set 23 broken bones over 4 years of fighting. He wasn't a doctor, just a man who'd had steady hands when the actual surgeons were drunk or dead or too busy with the ones who were screaming louder. This is going to hurt, he warned the woman. A lot. Her jaw tightened. I know. Rose, hold your mama's hand, tight. The girl obeyed, wrapping both her small hands around her mother's. Tom positioned his hands on the broken ankle. He could feel the bone misalignment under his fingers. This was going to be ugly. On 3, he said. 1. He pulled on 1, didn't wait, couldn't wait. The anticipation was sometimes worse than the pain itself. The woman screamed, short, sharp, immediately bitten off by her own teeth, clamping down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. Her body arched off the bed, every muscle rigid with agony. Tom worked fast, aligned the bone, wrapped the splint, tied it tight. The whole procedure took maybe 30 seconds. Felt like an hour. When it was done, he covered her with blankets and stepped back. The woman lay there gasping, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. But she didn't cry, didn't whimper, just breathed through the pain with a discipline that spoke of long practice. Tom had seen that before too. Women who'd learned to endure, to suffer in silence, to take whatever punishment came their way without complaint, because complaint only made things worse. Worst part's over, Tom said quietly. The woman nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Tom moved to the stove and began preparing food. Venison stew from yesterday, still good. Biscuits, coffee. Nothing fancy, but it was hot, and it was real, and these two looked like they hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. As he worked, he became aware of Rose watching him. Not with the wariness he might have expected, with something else. Curiosity, assessment, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. You're the man Uncle Samuel talked about, Rose said suddenly. Tom's hands froze on the pot. What did you say? Uncle Samuel, Mama's brother, he talks to me sometimes, in dreams. He says you're the one who tried to save him, the one who's been sad for a very long time. The cabin went deathly quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, holding its breath. Catherine's eyes had snapped open. She was staring at her daughter with a mixture of shock and something that might have been fear. Rose, she whispered, what are you talking about? You never knew Uncle Samuel. He died before you were born. I know, Mama, but he still visits me. He's been waiting. Rose looked at Tom with those two old eyes, waiting for someone who made him a promise, someone who keeps his promises even when it takes a long time. Tom felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. He gripped the edge of the stove to steady himself. What else did he tell you? Tom's voice came out strangled. He said you were his best friend. He said you held him when he died at a place called the Wilderness. He said to tell you. Rose paused, her young face serious. He said to tell you that you didn't break your promise. You just kept it late. The pot slipped from Tom's fingers, clattering against the stove. He didn't notice. Couldn't notice. Because everything in his world had just tilted sideways and he couldn't figure out which way was up anymore. How, Tom whispered. How could you possibly know that? Uncle Samuel tells me things. Rose has always had dreams, Catherine said, her voice shaking. Ever since she was small. Dreams about people she's never met. About things she shouldn't know. I thought it was just, I don't know, imagination. But this, she trailed off, staring at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time. Tom crossed the room slowly. He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself eye level with Rose. Tell me what he looks like. Your Uncle Samuel. Tall, Rose said without hesitation. Brown hair, brown eyes with gold spots in them, like when sunlight hits honey. He has a scar on his left hand from when he was 12. He was whittling a whistle for Mama, and the knife slipped. Catherine made a sound, not quite a gapom, not quite a sob. What's he wearing? Tom pressed. A blue coat, with gold buttons, like soldiers wear, but it's dirty and torn. There's blood on it, right here. Rose touched her own chest over her heart. Tom felt his own heart hammering against his ribs. The Union uniform. Samuel had been captured by Union forces early in the war, forced to work as a stretcher bearer. He'd been wearing Union blue when he died. Very few people knew that detail, and certainly no one who would have told this child. Tom stood and walked to the corner of the cabin where he kept his few personal possessions. From under his bed, he pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a photograph, yellowed with age, cracked at the edges, but still clear enough to make out two young men in uniform, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the reckless confidence of those who hadn't yet learned what war really cost. He brought it back to Rose and held it out. Is this him? Rose looked at the photograph. Her small finger reached out and touched one of the faces. That's Uncle Samuel, she said simply. And that's you. You both look so young, so happy. Tom's hands were shaking. He set the photograph down before he dropped it. I don't understand this, he said. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to understand, Rose said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of children who sometimes saw deeper than adults. Uncle Samuel just wants you to know he's not angry. He says you did your best. He says finding Mama now is exactly when you were supposed to find her. Catherine had been silent through this exchange, but now she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Your name, she said. What did you say your name was? Tom Brennan. Thomas Brennan, from Pennsylvania, who served with the 5th Corps under Warren? Yes. Catherine closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears were streaming down her face. Samuel wrote about you in his letters before he was captured. He said you were the most stubborn Union soldier he'd ever met, but also the most honorable. He said if he had to die in that war, he hoped it would be standing next to you. He got his wish, Tom said bitterly. I just wish he'd lived instead. How did it happen? How did my brother die? Tom didn't want to remember, didn't want to go back to that place. But he owed her the truth. Owed Samuel that much at least. The Wilderness, Tom said, May 1864. We were holding a position when the Confederates counterattacked. There was a rebel sharpshooter in the trees. I didn't see him. Samuel did. He pushed me aside and took the bullet meant for me, right through the chest. Tom's voice cracked, but he forced himself to continue. I held him while he bled out. It didn't take long, maybe 5 minutes. He was calm, didn't scream or thrash, just looked at me and said, find Catherine, my sister. Take care of her, she's got no one else. I promised him I would, swore on everything I had, but then you'd vanished. Married someone, gone west. I looked for 3 years and couldn't find you. So I stopped looking, told myself you didn't need me, that you'd made your own way. He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. I failed him, the one promise that mattered most, and I failed. You didn't fail, Rose said quietly. You're here now. Catherine was weeping openly now, the grief of 8 years finally allowed to break free. I never knew how he died or who was with him. The telegram just said, killed in action. I thought he died alone, I thought. She couldn't finish, just pulled Rose close and held her, both of them crying now. Tom turned away, giving them what privacy he could in the small cabin. He went back to the stove and finished preparing the meal, though his hands shook so badly he could barely hold the spoon. Outside, the storm hit full force. Wind shrieked around the cabin walls. Snow piled against the windows. The whole structure creaked and groaned like a ship in a gale. But inside, something had shifted. Some invisible weight that Tom had carried for 8 years was beginning, just barely, to lift. When the food was ready, they ate in silence. Rose and Catherine were starving. That much was obvious. They tried to eat slowly with manners, but hunger eventually won out. Tom let them have seconds, thirds. There was more than enough. After the meal, Rose curled up beside her mother on the bed. Within minutes, she was asleep, exhausted by cold and fear, and whatever strange gift let her speak with the dead. Catherine looked at Tom across the small cabin. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything. Don't thank me yet. You said someone was chasing you, someone named Victor. Tell me who he is and what he wants." Catherine's face hardened. "That's a long story. We've got all night." She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts or her courage, or maybe just trying to figure out how much to reveal to this stranger who claimed to be her dead brother's friend. Finally, she spoke. "Victor Morrison is my brother-in-law, my late husband, Robert's brother. Robert died 3 years ago from consumption. Or at least, that's what the doctor said. I think Victor poisoned him." Tom leaned forward. "Why would he do that?" "For the inheritance. Robert left everything to Rose. She'll inherit $47,000 when she turns 21. But until then, Victor is her legal guardian. He controls everything, the money, the property, us. And he's been using that control." It wasn't a question. The bruises on Catherine's neck made it obvious. "He started slow," Catherine said. Her voice had gone flat, distant, like she was reciting facts about someone else's life. "After Robert died. Just small things at first, telling me what to wear, who I could see, where I could go. Then it got worse. He'd fly into rages over nothing, accuse me of things I hadn't done, punish me for imagined offenses. The bruises. Yes." She touched her neck self-consciously. "He likes to choke me. Not enough to kill, just enough to remind me that he could. That I'm alive only because he allows it." "And Rose?" Catherine's face twisted with anguish. "He's never touched her. Not yet. But I see the way he looks at her. Like she's property. Like she's something he owns and can do whatever he wants with. I knew it was only a matter of time, so I ran." "How long have you been running?" 3 weeks. I waited until Victor went to Helena on business. Then I took Rose and whatever money I'd managed to hide and we left. But he has resources, Pinkerton detectives, men who track people for money. Every time I think we've lost him, he finds us again." "How'd you end up here? At my door?" Catherine shook her head. "I don't know. We were headed for the Canadian border. Thought maybe we could disappear there, start over where he couldn't reach us. Then the storm hit and my ankle gave out and I couldn't walk anymore. I saw your smoke, your light. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd give us shelter for one night before we moved on." "And you had no idea who I was?" "No, not until Rose started talking about Samuel. Not until you showed me that photograph." She looked at him with wonder and confusion and something that might have been hope. "What are the odds? Of all the cabins in Montana, of all the men we could have stumbled across, we found you, Samuel's friend, the man he asked to take care of me." "It's not odds," Rose murmured sleepily from the bed, not quite asleep after all. "Uncle Samuel guided us here. He's been guiding Mama for weeks, though she didn't know it. He made sure we'd find Mr. Tom, because promises matter, even after death, especially after death." And then she was asleep for real, her breathing deep and even. Tom and Catherine sat in silence, letting Rose's words settle over them like snow. "Do you believe her?" Catherine finally asked. "About Samuel? About speaking with the dead?" "I don't know what I believe," Tom admitted, "but I know she told me things she couldn't have known. Details no one could have told her. So either she's got some kind of gift, or I'm going mad, or the world is stranger than I thought. Does it matter which?" "No, I suppose it doesn't." Tom stood and moved to the window, looking out at the storm. "What matters is Victor's coming. You said he always finds you. That means he'll find you here. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, but soon." "I know. That's why we have to leave, as soon as the storm breaks. You can't walk, not for weeks, maybe months. Then I'll crawl if I have to. I won't let him find us. I won't let him take Rose." Tom turned back to face her. In the firelight, she looked fierce, broken but not defeated, a mother ready to die fighting for her child. "There's another option," Tom said slowly. "What?" "You stay. both of you, and when Victor comes, we face him. Together. Catherine stared at him. You don't know what you're saying. Victor is dangerous. He's rich, powerful, connected. He has the law on his side. Those guardianship papers are legitimate, or close enough that no court will challenge them. Maybe, but he's also a man, and all men bleed. I won't let you die for us. Not planning to die, Tom said, but I made your brother a promise 8 years ago. I failed to keep it then. I'm not failing now. You don't owe me anything. I owe Samuel everything. He died so I could live. The least I can do is keep his sister and niece safe. Catherine's eyes filled with fresh tears. Wait, why would you risk your life for two strangers? Tom didn't have a good answer for that. Or maybe he had too many answers and couldn't sort through them all. Because Samuel had asked him to. Because these two represented something he'd thought lost forever. A chance at redemption. A purpose beyond building coffins and waiting to die. Because, he said finally, I've been dead inside for 8 years. Walking around. Breathing. But dead where it counts. And tonight, for the first time since the wilderness, I feel alive again. That's worth fighting for. Before Catherine could respond, Rose sat bolt upright in bed. Her eyes were open but unfocused, like she was seeing something invisible to everyone else. He's coming, she said in a voice that wasn't quite her own. Deeper. Older. The bad man. Uncle Victor. He'll be here tomorrow when the sun is high. How do you know? Tom asked. Uncle Samuel showed me, in a dream. 3 men on horses. Uncle Victor and 2 others with guns. They're in town right now, at the hotel, asking questions, offering money for information about us. She blinked and her eyes cleared. She looked scared now, just a little girl again. He's very angry, Mama. Uncle Samuel says he's more dangerous than ever because he's desperate. Something's gone wrong with his plans. Money troubles. He needs Rose's inheritance sooner than he thought. And if he can't control it. Rose's voice dropped to a whisper. If he can't control it, Uncle Samuel says he might try to make Rose have an accident. So the money goes to him directly. The cabin went silent except for the howling wind. Tom and Catherine stared at each other, both understanding what Rose was saying, what she was implying. Victor Morrison might be willing to kill a 7-year-old child for money. Tom's jaw clenched. His hand dropped unconsciously to his pistol. Then we'll be ready for him, Tom said quietly. Tomorrow at high sun, when he comes, we'll be ready. He looked at Catherine, but I need to know everything. About Victor, about Robert, about what you've seen and what you suspect. Everything that might help us survive what's coming. Catherine nodded slowly. All right, I'll tell you everything. And as the storm raged outside and Rose slept between them, Catherine began to talk. About her marriage to Robert Morrison. About his slow death that might not have been natural. About Victor's gradual takeover of their lives. About the first time he hit her and the lies she told herself to explain it away. About the asylum where he had her committed for 6 weeks while he told everyone she was having a breakdown. About the previous escape attempts that had ended in broken bones and renewed captivity. She talked for hours, her voice never rising above a steady monotone, like if she kept her emotions flat enough, the memories couldn't hurt her. Tom listened without interrupting. Absorbing, planning, preparing for war. Because that's what tomorrow would bring, war. Not with armies and artillery, but war nonetheless. The most dangerous kind, the intimate kind, where you looked your enemy in the eye and decided who lived and who died. Tom had thought his fighting days were over, thought he'd left that part of himself buried in Virginia mud. But as he checked his rifle and counted his ammunition and planned fields of fire, he realized something. He'd never stopped being a soldier. He'd just been waiting for something worth fighting for. And now, impossibly, miraculously, 8 years after he'd thought he'd lost his chance, Tom Brennan had found it. Outside the cabin, the storm finally began to ease. The wind dropped from a scream to a moan. The snow fell lighter, straighter. By dawn, the sky would be clear, and Victor Morrison would come. Dawn came slowly to Montana, bleeding pale gold across a world buried in white. Tom Brennan stood at the window of his cabin, rifle in hand, watching the sun climb above the eastern ridge. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep, not with what was coming. Behind him, Catherine and Rose still slept in his bed, exhausted by their ordeal. Sergeant lay at the foot of the bed, a silent guardian. The old hound had barely left Rose's side since they'd arrived, as if he too sensed the child needed protecting. Tom checked his rifle for the third time that morning. Spencer repeating a rifle, 52 caliber, 7 rounds in the tube magazine, effective range 500 yards. He'd killed men at that distance during the war. Could do it again if necessary. The thought didn't trouble him as much as it should have. He moved to the stove and built up the fire, working quietly so as not to wake them. Coffee first, strong and black, then bacon, eggs, biscuits, not elaborate but substantial. They'd need their strength today. As Tom worked, his mind ran through tactical considerations. The cabin sat in a shallow depression, surrounded by open ground for 30 yards in every direction. Good defensive position. Anyone approaching would be visible long before they reached the door. The workshop to the east provided some cover, but not much. 3 men, Rose had said, Victor and 2 hired guns. Tom was outnumbered, but he had home advantage. Knew the terrain, knew the sight lines, had fortifications such as it was. Still, 3 against 1 were poor odds, even for a man who'd survived 4 years of war. The sound of Catherine's stirring pulled Tom from his calculations. She sat up carefully, wincing as her broken ankle protested the movement. For a moment she looked confused, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned and her face tightened with anxiety. "Good morning," Tom said quietly. "Coffee's ready." Catherine accepted the tin cup he offered, wrapping both hands around its warmth. "You didn't sleep." "Habit from the war. Night before a battle, you stay awake. Keep watch. Make sure the enemy doesn't catch you unprepared." "Is that what today is? A battle?" "Might be. Depends on how reasonable Victor's feeling. Though from what you've told me, reasonable ain't his strong suit." Catherine sipped her coffee, grimacing at its strength. "He'll have legal papers, documents proving his guardianship. He'll make it sound like he's the victim. Like I'm the one breaking the law by keeping Rose from him. Papers can be challenged. Not out here, not by people like us. Victor knows judges, lawyers, politicians. He's been building his network for years. That's how he operates. Everything legal, everything documented. So when he hurts people, it looks like he's just exercising his rights." Tom brought her a plate of food. "Eat, you'll need strength." As Catherine ate, Rose began to wake. The child's eyes opened slowly, and for a blessed moment she looked like what she was. A 7-year-old waking up warm and safe. Then awareness returned, and the old soul look came back into her eyes. "Is today the day?" Rose asked. "Looks like it," Tom said. "I'm scared." "That's smart. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you careful." Tom knelt beside the bed. "But here's what I need you to do, Rose. When the men come, when Victor arrives, I need you to go down into the root cellar and stay there. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay hidden until your mama or I come get you." "What if you don't come?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Then you wait until night," Tom said steadily, "and you follow the North Star until you reach Martha Brennan's place, 2 miles east. She'll help you." Catherine made a small sound of protest, but Tom continued. "I'm not planning on dying, Rose. But in war, you plan for everything, and including the worst, understand?" Rose nodded solemnly. "Uncle Samuel says you're going to have to make a choice today. A hard one." "What kind of choice?" "Between killing Uncle Victor or letting him live. He says both options have consequences. But you'll know what to do when the moment comes." Tom absorbed this. He'd been in enough fights to know that killing was sometimes necessary, sometimes the only option. But he'd also seen what killing did to a man's soul. Seen soldiers who came home with their bodies intact, but their spirits shattered by the things they'd done. "Your Uncle Samuel giving me any hints about which choice is right?" Rose shook her head. "He says it's your choice. That's what makes it matter." Before Tom could respond, Sergeant's head came up sharply. The old dog stared at the door, ears forward. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Someone's coming," Tom said. He moved to the window and peered out. A single rider approached from the east, moving carefully through the deep snow. Not Victor. Wrong build, wrong posture. This rider was older, smaller, bundled in heavy wool. Tom relaxed slightly. It's Martha, my neighbor. He opened the door as Martha Brennan reined in her horse. She was 67 years old, gray-haired and weathered by a lifetime of Montana winters, but her eyes were sharp as ever, missing nothing. "Morning, Tom," Martha said. "Saw your smoke last night during the storm. Figured I'd check you hadn't frozen to death." Then her gaze moved past him to Catherine and Rose in the cabin behind. "Well, yeah," Martha said after a long pause. "This is unexpected." Tom stepped aside. "Martha, this is Catherine Morrison and her daughter Rose. They came in during the storm." "Catherine, Rose, this is Martha Brennan, my neighbor." Martha dismounted and stomped snow from her boots. She walked into the cabin with the confidence of long familiarity, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Catherine's splinted ankle, the bruises on her neck, Rose's too thin frame, the defensive way mother and daughter sat close together. "Morrison," Martha said slowly. "Any relation to Victor Morrison? Banker type from Helena?" Catherine tensed visibly. "You know him?" "Know of him. Man came through Silver Creek about a week ago asking questions, looking for a woman and child who'd run off, offering gold coins for information. Said his poor sister-in-law was mentally unstable. Said she'd kidnapped his niece." Martha's gaze sharpened. "I'm guessing that was you." "It was, but I'm not mentally unstable, and Rose is my daughter, not his to take." "Figured as much." Martha pulled up a chair and sat uninvited. "Man had the look. I've seen it before, and the kind who smiles while he breaks your fingers." She turned to Tom. "This why you look like you're preparing for siege?" "Victor's coming. Today, probably. Rose says he's in town asking questions." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Rose says? How does a 7-year-old know what a man in town is doing?" "Long story," Tom said. "I've got time." So Tom told her about Samuel Hart, about the promise Baudelaire years ago, about Rose's strange ability to see and know things she shouldn't, about Victor's pursuit and the danger they were in. Martha listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with each revelation. When Tom finished, Martha sat back and studied Rose with new interest. "Child," Martha said carefully, "you say you dream about dead people? That they talk to you?" Rose nodded. "Uncle Samuel mostly, but sometimes others. They want to help, want to warn us about things." "My grandmother had the sight," Martha said. "Knew things before they happened, saw people who weren't there. It runs in families sometimes. Skips generations." She looked at Catherine. "You have any ancestors with the gift?" "My great-aunt, maybe. She used to talk about seeing her dead husband. We all thought she was just grieving. Maybe she was seeing him." Martha turned back to Rose. "What else has your Uncle Samuel told you about today?" "That 3 men are coming, Uncle Victor and 2 men with guns, that Mr. Tom will have to choose whether to kill or show mercy, and that no matter what happens, everything will change after today." Martha absorbed this, then looked at Tom. "You believe her?" She knew things about Samuel's death no one could have told her. New details I've never spoken about. "So yeah, I believe her. Then we need to prepare." Martha stood and moved to the window, studying the approach to the cabin. 3 armed men against 1, poor odds. "I know. Unless it's 3 against 3. Tom looked at her sharply. "Martha, I can't ask you to risk yourself for people you just met." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Martha's jaw set with determination. "Besides, you think I'm going to let some rich bully terrorize a woman and child? I've been fighting men like Victor Morrison since before you were born, Tom Brennan. I ain't stopping now." "Can you shoot?" Martha pulled back her coat to reveal a double-barrel shotgun. "What do you think?" Despite everything, Tom felt something loosen in his chest. He wasn't alone. For the first time in 8 years, he wasn't alone. "Thank you," Tom said quietly. "Save your thanks for after." Martha turned to Catherine. "Can you use a gun?" "Yes. My husband Robert taught me years ago." "Good." Tom pulled his pistol from his belt and handed it to her. "Colt Army, 44 caliber, 6 rounds. It kicks hard, so use both hands. Aim center mass." Catherine checked the chamber with practiced ease. "Victor doesn't know I can shoot. He thinks I'm helpless." "That's an advantage, then." Martha looked around the cabin. "We need a plan. Tom, you take the front. I'll cover the east window. Catherine, you take the west. Rose goes in the root cellar, like you said. What if they don't come? What if Rose's dream was wrong? Catherine asked. As if in answer, Rose suddenly went rigid, her eyes unfocused, staring at something no one else could see. They're leaving town now, Rose said into that strange, distant voice. Uncle Victor is angry. One of the men at the hotel told him about Mr. Tom, about the coffin maker who lives west of town, about Martha visiting yesterday. Uncle Victor knows. He's coming. Rose blinked and her eyes cleared. She looked frightened now. How long do we have? Tom asked. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Tom looked at Martha and Catherine. Then we prepare. Now. The next 40 minutes passed in controlled urgency. Tom positioned ammunition where he could reach it easily. Martha checked her shotgun and took position at the east window. Catherine, hampered by her broken ankle, propped herself against the west wall with Tom's pistol in her lap. Rose, as instructed, climbed down into the root cellar. Sergeant followed her without prompting, as if understanding his job was to guard the child. Tom closed the trap door and covered it with a rug. No matter what happens, Tom said to the floor, knowing Rose could hear him, you stay down there until one of us comes for you. Promise me. I promise, came Rose's muffled voice. Tom moved to his position by the front door. From here, he had clear sight lines to the approach. Anyone coming would be visible for at least 200 yards. They waited. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of the fire and the soft whisper of wind against the walls. Tom's heart beat steady and slow. This was familiar. The waiting before battle. The moment of terrible clarity when time seemed to stretch and every sense sharpened. Tom, Catherine has said quietly, if things go wrong, if Victor kills me, promise you'll keep Rose safe. Get her away from here, somewhere he can't find her. Things ain't going wrong. But if they do, Tom looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, but also the fierce determination, the mother's love that would burn down the world to protect her child. If it comes to that, Tom said, I promise. On Samuel's grave, I promise, Bragto. Catherine nodded, satisfied. Martha, Tom said, you still have time to leave. This ain't your fight. Shut up, Tom, I'm staying. Despite the tension, Tom almost smiled. Martha Brennan was as stubborn as Montana itself, more waiting. Tom's hands stayed steady on his rifle. He'd learned patience in the war. Learned that rushing usually got you killed. Better to wait, let the enemy come to you. Let them expose themselves first. Then he saw them. 3 riders cresting the ridge to the east, moving slowly through the snow. Careful, deliberate. They're here, Tom said quietly. Martha shifted position slightly. Catherine's hands tightened on the pistol. The riders came closer. Tom could make out details now. The man in front rode like he was born in the saddle. Well-dressed even at this distance. Expensive coat, fine hat. That would be Victor. Behind him, 2 rougher men, hired guns by the look of them. Big, hard-faced, the kind who did dirty work for money and didn't ask questions. The riders stopped about 30 yards out, just beyond easy pistol range. Smart. Victor hadn't survived this long by being reckless. Tom stepped out onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. The winter air bit at his face. His breath fogged in front of him. That's close enough, Tom called. The man in front, Victor Morrison, raised one hand in a peaceful gesture. His smile was charming, reasonable. The smile of a man used to getting what he wanted through persuasion rather than force. Mr. Brennan, I presume. Victor's voice was cultured, educated, nothing threatening in his tone. Might I have a word? You can have several words, from right where you are. Victor's smile tightened slightly, but held. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm looking for my sister-in-law and my niece, Catherine and Rose Morrison. I believe they may have sought shelter here during the storm. And if they did, then I would ask you to return them to my care. They left Helena without permission. Catherine is unwell. She requires medical supervision. She looks plenty well to me. Victor's mask slipped just a fraction. A flash of annoyance in his eyes before the smile returned. Mr. Brennan, I don't wish to involve the authorities, but I have legal guardianship over my niece Rose. I have documents proving this. If you harbor them against my lawful authority, you're committing a crime. Documents can be forged. These are certified by the territorial court. Don't change what I see with my own eyes. And what do you see? Victor's voice had taken on an edge. Woman with a broken ankle she's been walking on for 3 days. Bruises on her neck shaped like a man's handprint. Broken wrists that healed wrong. Fear in her eyes every time your name gets mentioned. Victor's jaw tightened. The charming facade was cracking. Catherine is prone to accidents, a consequence of her mental instability. That's interesting, because she seems real stable to me. Clear-headed, smart, determined to protect her child. Mr. Brennan, Victor's voice had gone cold now. I'm trying to be reasonable. But my patience has limits. Return Catherine and Rose to me now, or I'll have no choice but to take legal action against you. Legal action's fine, but you're not taking them today. Victor made a gesture to his hired men. They dismounted, hands moving toward their pistols. Tom raised his rifle, aimed directly at Victor's chest. First man who draws dies, Tom said calmly. Question is, which one of you wants to be first? Everyone froze. Victor stared at Tom, reassessing. He'd expected easy intimidation, a lone man who'd cave under pressure and legal threats. Instead, he'd found someone who'd been in enough fights to know that sometimes violence was the only language bullies understood. You're outnumbered 3-1, Victor said. His voice was tight now, the smooth charm completely gone. Can't count, Morrison. Martha's voice rang out from the window. The barrel of her shotgun became visible. That's 3-on-3. Victor's head snapped toward the window. Then toward the other window where Catherine appeared, Tom's pistol in her hands. For the first time, real fear flickered across Victor's face. This wasn't going according to plan. He was exposed, outnumbered on unfavorable ground, facing people who clearly weren't afraid to fight. Catherine, Victor called. His voice had changed again. Now it carried wounded confusion, as if he couldn't understand why she was doing this. The performance of a man unjustly accused. Why are you doing this? I've only ever tried to help you. After Robert died, I took care of you and Rose. Provided for you. Protected you. Protected me? Catherine's voice was ice. Is that what you call breaking my wrist? Choking me until I passed out? Locking me in an asylum for 6 weeks? You were hysterical. Unstable, I had to. You had to nothing. You wanted control. Control of Robert's money, control of Rose's inheritance, control of us. Victor's face twisted. The mask was fully off now. That money is mine. Everything Robert had, I helped him build. And you were nothing when he married you. A penniless refugee from a burned-out plantation. You should be grateful. Grateful? Catherine laughed, a harsh sound without humor. For what? For the prison you made of my life? I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but fear and pain and the knowledge that I was owned like property. The two hired guns were backing away slowly, hands up. They'd signed on for simple intimidation. Retrieving a woman and child. Not this, not a domestic war with a widow who could shoot and a war veteran with steady hands. We ain't part of this, one of them said. This is family business. We're leaving. You're not going anywhere, Victor screamed. I paid you. You do what I say. But the hired men were already mounting their horses, wanting no part of whatever ugliness was about to happen. Keep the money, the second man called back. It ain't worth dying over. They rode off, leaving Victor alone and exposed. Victor's hand dropped to his belt, fumbling for a pistol. His movements were clumsy, unpracticed. This was a man who'd spent his life using lawyers and legal documents as weapons, not guns. Don't, Tom warned. His rifle hadn't wavered from Victor's chest, but Victor was past reason now. All his careful plans, all his control had evaporated. He yanked the pistol free, raised it toward the cabin. Tom could have killed him. His finger was on the trigger. One squeeze and Victor Morrison would be dead before he hit the ground. But in that frozen moment, Tom heard Rose's voice in his memory. Uncle Samuel says killing makes you into the thing you hate. And he heard Samuel's actual voice. Not a memory, but something deeper. A presence or so. Be the man I believed you were, Tom, not the man we're made you. Time seemed to stop. Tom saw two futures branching before him. In one, he pulled the trigger. Victor died. Rose was safe. But Tom became something he'd spent 8 years trying not to be. A killer. A man who chose violence when other options existed. In the other future, he showed mercy. Risked that mercy being a mistake. But remained the man Samuel had believed in. The man who valued life even when it would be easier to take it. The choice hung in the balance for less than a second. Felt like an eternity. Tom adjusted his aim and fired. The bullet kicked up dirt between Victor's feet. Victor jumped, startled, dropping at his pistol. Tom cycled another round. This time he aimed directly at Victor's head. "Next one kills," Tom said quietly. "Pick up your gun again and you're dead." Victor stood trembling, his expensive coat splattered with mud, his face pale with shock and fury. The sound of hoofbeats made everyone turn. A group of riders was approaching from the south. Tom counted 6, all women, led by a tall, gray-haired figure who sat her horse with authority. "Judge Eleanor Hartley," Martha said with satisfaction. "About time." The judge reined in her horse, surveying the scene with sharp eyes. She was in her 60s, stern-faced, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades making hard decisions. "Martha," Judge Hartley said in greeting, "got your message. Came as soon as the storm broke." Her gaze shifted to Victor. "Mr. Morrison, we meet again." "Judge Hartley." Victor's voice shook slightly, but he tried for dignity. "Thank goodness you're here. These people have kidnapped my niece. They're holding her against my lawful guardianship. I demand you arrest them immediately." "Interesting." Judge Hartley dismounted slowly. "Because I've been hearing some very disturbing things about you, Mr. Morrison. Stories from servants, from neighbors, from business associates who suddenly went missing. Lies, all lies. Perhaps that's what trials are for." The judge looked toward the cabin. "Mrs. Morrison, are you in there by choice or by force?" Catherine appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame to support her broken ankle. "By choice, Your Honor. I came here fleeing from Victor. He's been abusing me for 3 years. I have evidence. My husband's diary. Documentation of Victor's control." "That diary is a forgery," Victor shouted. "Then you won't mind if we examine back for a minute." Judge Hartley gestured to one of the women riders. "Sarah, take notes. This is going on the record." Victor's face was turning red, veins standing out on his forehead. Years of careful control, of maintaining his facade, were crumbling. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "I have rights, legal standing, documents proving my guardianship." "Documents that may have been obtained through fraud or coercion," the judge said calmly, "which we'll examine after we address some other concerns." At that moment, the trap door in the cabin opened. Rose climbed out, Sergeant beside her. She walked to the doorway and stood next to her mother, small but fierce. Victor's eyes locked on her. Something hungry and desperate moved behind his gaze. "Rose," he said, his voice taking on a false gentleness. "Come here, dear. Come to your uncle. These people are confusing you. We need to go home." Rose didn't move, didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, she looked directly at Victor and spoke. "I know what you did." The words hung in the cold air like a curse. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victor said, but his voice had gone hollow. "I know about Mr. Harrison, Papa's business partner, how you killed him 7 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Victor's face had gone pale as snow. "That's impossible. How could you? You hit him with the poker in the study when he found out you were stealing from the company. Then you pushed him down the stairs and you buried him behind the carriage house, under the rose bushes." Rose's young voice was steady, implacable. "You planted them yourself the next spring. Mama's roses, you called them, in memory of Mama." "Stop it," Victor whispered. "And you kept his watch, the gold one with his initials inside. J.H. You keep it in a red leather box in your desk, 3rd drawer on the right." "Stop it!" Victor screamed. Judge Hartley had gone very still. "Jonathan Harrison. He disappeared 7 years ago. The assumption was embezzlement and flight." She looked at Rose. "Child, how do you know these things?" "Uncle Samuel told me, my mama's brother. He died in the war, but he still watches over us, and the dead talk to the dead. Mr. Harrison's spirit told Uncle Samuel, and Uncle Samuel told me. The women riders were staring at Rose with a mixture of fear and wonder. Judge Hartley's face had taken on a considering expression. Convenient, Victor snarled. A child's ghost story. You expect anyone to believe this nonsense? I believe, Judge Hartley said slowly, that it warrants investigation. If there's a body where the child says, if there's a watch where she describes, then we have grounds for a murder investigation. Victor's control finally shattered completely. He lunged toward Rose, murder in his eyes. If I can't have the inheritance, no one will. Tom moved faster than thought. He was between Victor and Rose in 2 strides, rifle butt swinging. It caught Victor in the chest, driving him backward. Victor fell hard into the snow. Tom stood over him, rifle aimed at Victor's head. For the second time, he had a clear shot. Could end this right now, permanently. Every fiber in his body screamed to pull the trigger. This man had terrorized Catherine, had hurt Rose, had killed at least 1 person, probably 2. The world would be better without him. But Rose was watching. Catherine was watching. And somewhere, in some place beyond sight, Samuel was watching too. Tom took a long breath, lowered the rifle slightly. Get up, Tom said, slow. Victor rose unsteadily. His expensive coat was ruined. His face was bleeding where he'd bit his lip in the fall. But worse than any physical damage was the look in his eyes. The realization that he'd lost, that his control, his power, his carefully constructed empire had crumbled to nothing. Victor Morrison, Judge Hartley said formally, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of murder, fraud, and assault. You'll be held pending investigation. 2 of the women riders dismounted and bound Victor's hands. He didn't resist, just stood there, blank-eyed, all the fight gone out of him. As they led him to a horse, Rose approached Tom. She looked up at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. You chose right, she said softly. Uncle Samuel says you chose right. Tom knelt down to her level. I wanted to kill him. God help me, I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what makes you different from him. Rose reached up and touched Tom's weathered cheek. That's what makes you worthy of the promise. Then she hugged him, small arms wrapping around his neck. Tom held her carefully, this strange child who saw the dead and spoke prophecy. Held her like she was precious, like she was worth every hard choice he'd ever made. Catherine came to them, limping but standing on her own. She put one hand on Tom's shoulder, one on Rose's head. Thank you, Catherine said, her voice broke. Thank you for not becoming him, for staying who you are. Tom stood slowly, looked at the 3 of them, this makeshift family formed in crisis, then at Martha, tough as whipcord and twice as reliable, at Judge Hartley and her riders, women who'd come when called to help other women in need. I didn't do this alone, Tom said. No, Martha agreed. You didn't, and you won't face what comes next alone either. Judge Hartley approached, her expression thoughtful. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to need that diary, and I'll need formal statements from you both. But first, she looked at Rose. We need to search the Morrison property. If there's a body where this child says, we'll need to exhume it and search that desk. Do it, Catherine said. The judge nodded. It'll take time, paperwork, legal procedures. In the meantime, you'll need somewhere to stay, somewhere safe. They're staying here, Tom said. There was no question in his voice, a statement of fact. For as long as they need. Catherine looked at him, surprise and something else, something warmer in her eyes. Tom, we can't impose. Not imposing, staying. He held her gaze. That's what Samuel asked me to do. Take care of you. And that's what I'm going to do. For as long as it takes. Rose looked between them and smiled. Not the ancient, knowing smile. Just a child's smile. Simple and genuine. Uncle Samuel says it's about time, Rose announced. He says Mr. Tom's been lonely long enough. Despite everything, despite the tension and fear and violence of the morning, Tom felt himself smiling too. Actually smiling. For the first time in 8 years. As Victor was led away and the women riders prepared to leave, as Martha began planning where everyone would sleep and what needed to be done next, Tom stood on his porch and looked at the snow-covered valley. The storm had passed. The sky was clear. And for the first time since the wilderness, since Samuel died in his arms, Tom Brennan felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of a drowning man, but real hope. The kind that came from knowing you'd done the right thing even when the wrong thing would have been easier. The kind that came from keeping promises, even 8 years late. The kind that whispered, quietly but persistently, that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of life weren't behind him after all. Maybe they were just beginning. The days following Victor Morrison's arrest passed in a strange suspension of time. Tom's cabin, which had been a tomb of silence for 8 years, suddenly filled with life. Catherine's quiet humming as she mended clothes. Rose's laughter when Sergeant performed his old tricks for scraps of food. The smell of bread baking. The sound of women's voices discussing practical matters like laundry and supplies and how to make one small cabin comfortable for 3 people and a dog. Tom wasn't sure how to navigate this new world. He'd lived alone for so long that simple things felt complicated. Where to look when Catherine was changing Rose's bandages. How to move around the cabin without constantly bumping into someone. The strange intimacy of sharing meals, sharing space, sharing the thousand small moments that made up a life. But slowly, awkwardly, they found their rhythm. 1 week after the confrontation, Martha arrived with news. She dismounted her horse with the careful movements of someone whose joints complained about winter cold, but her eyes were bright with satisfaction. They found him, Martha announced without preamble. Jonathan Harrison, exactly where Rose said he'd be. Catherine, who'd been sitting by the window with her injured ankle propped up, went pale. And the watch? Red leather box, third drawer right, gold watch engraved J.H. from loving wife, 1865. Martha shook her head in wonder. How that child knew, I'll never understand. But she was right about every detail. Tom had been cleaning his rifle by the stove. He looked up sharply. That's enough for trial? Trial's already done. Victor confessed. Martha pulled off her heavy coat and warmed her hands by the fire. Prosecutor offered him life in prison instead of hanging if he admitted to everything. He took it. He confessed to murdering Jonathan Harrison? Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper. Harrison and your husband, Robert, admitted to poisoning Robert with arsenic over a period of 18 months. Said he couldn't wait any longer for his inheritance. Said the gambling debts were piling up and he needed Robert's money to cover his losses. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Rose, who'd been playing with Sergeant in the corner, came and stood beside her mother. Catherine pulled her daughter close, holding her tight. So it's over, Catherine said. Really over. The criminal part is. Martha settled into a chair with a sigh. But there's more. Judge Hartley tore up the guardianship papers. Said they were obtained through fraud and duress. You have full custody of Rose now. Legal and uncontested. Catherine closed her eyes. Tears leaked from beneath her lids, but she was smiling. I can't believe it. 3 years of living in fear and it's just over. Not quite over, Martha said. There's the matter of the inheritance. Tom and Catherine both looked at her. Robert Morrison's estate, Rose's trust, it's all valid. Victor's crimes don't change the fact that Robert left everything to his daughter. Which means, Martha paused, letting the words sink in. You and Rose are about to become very wealthy, Catherine. The words seemed to echo in the small cabin. Wealthy, after 3 years of being controlled, of having every penny monitored and every expense questioned. After 3 weeks of running with nothing but the clothes on their backs. How much? Catherine asked. $47,000 give or take, plus Robert's business interests, which are still generating income. The lawyers are sorting through it all, but the preliminary estimate is you're looking at close to $60,000 once everything's settled. Tom whistled low. That was a fortune, enough to live comfortably for 3 lifetimes. Enough to go anywhere, do anything. Enough to leave Montana and never look back. The thought settled in Tom's chest like a stone. Of course Catherine would leave. Why would she stay in a one-room cabin in the middle of nowhere when she could afford a mansion in San Francisco or Boston or anywhere civilization existed? He'd always known this was temporary, a way station on their journey to somewhere better. But knowing it and feeling it were different things. What will you do? Martha asked gently, as if reading Tom's thoughts. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the cabin, at the simple furniture Tom had built, at the window where morning light streamed through clean curtains she'd hung, at Rose playing with Sargent, at Tom himself standing by the stove trying to look like this news didn't affect him at all. "I don't know yet," Catherine said finally. "I haven't thought that far ahead. For so long, all I could think about was surviving the next day, running to the next town, keeping Rose safe. I never let myself imagine what came after." "You've got time now," Martha said. "Time to figure out what you want, where you want to go, how you want to live." She stood, preparing to leave. "Just remember you've got friends here, people who care about you and Rose, whatever you decide." After Martha left, the cabin felt smaller somehow. The unspoken question hung in the air like smoke. What now? Tom went out outside to split firewood. Not because they needed it, but because he needed something to do with it in his hands. Something to keep him from thinking about empty cabins and silent evenings and going back to the way things were before. He was halfway through the woodpile when Catherine appeared in the doorway, leaning on a makeshift crutch Tom had fashioned for her. "Can we talk?" she asked. Tom set down the axe. "Sure." Catherine made her way carefully down the steps and stood beside the chopping block. The afternoon sun caught in her dark hair, and Tom was struck by how different she looked from the terrified woman who'd collapsed in his doorway 3 weeks ago. She'd gained weight, the bruises had faded, the fear had left her eyes. She was beautiful. The thought startled him, not because it was true, but because he'd allowed himself to notice, allowed himself to feel something other than the numb emptiness that had been his constant companion for 8 years. "I've been thinking," Catherine said, "about what Martha said, about the money and what comes next." Tom braced himself. Here it came, the polite goodbye, the grateful acknowledgement of his help, the inevitable departure. "I know you probably have plans," Tom started. "Places you want to go, things you want to see, and you should. You and Rose deserve better than." "Tom," Catherine cut him off, "let me finish." He stopped talking. Catherine took a breath, gathering her words. "For 3 years, Victor made every decision for me, what I wore, where I went, who I spoke to, what I ate. Every aspect of my life was controlled by someone else. And before Victor, there was the war and losing everything. And before that, my father controlled everything. I've never been free to make my own choices." "I understand," Tom said quietly. "You want your freedom. You should have it." "You're not listening." Catherine's voice was firm but not unkind. "I'm trying to tell you that for the first time in my entire life, I get to choose. Not because someone's forcing me, not because I have no other options, but because I actually want to." Tom looked at her, not understanding. "I want to stay," Catherine said. "Here, with you, if you'll have us." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Tom gripped the axe handle to steady himself. "Catherine, you don't have to stay out of gratitude. I didn't help you expecting anything in return. You're free. You can go anywhere. Do anything. You shouldn't limit yourself to." "To what? To a one-room cabin with a man who builds coffins for a living?" Catherine smiled, but there was something fierce in her eyes. "Tom, do you think I care about that? After what I've been through? After what you've given us?" "I haven't given you anything. You gave us safety. You gave us dignity. You treated Rose like she mattered, like her strange gift was something to respect rather than fear. You kept Samuel's promise, even though it took you 8 years and cost you dearly." Catherine moved closer. "And you chose not to kill Victor when you had every right and every reason. You chose to be the kind of man who keeps his humanity even when it's hard. That's worth more than any amount of money." Tom didn't know what to say. Words felt inadequate. "But," Catherine continued, "I don't want to stay just out of gratitude either. I want to stay because—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Because I haven't felt this safe in years. Because Rose laughs here. Because you make me feel like a person instead of property. Because when I think about leaving, about going somewhere else, all I feel is loss." "Catherine," Tom's voice was rough, "I'm not a good bet. I'm 42 years old. I've got nightmares that wake me screaming. I don't know how to be around people anymore. I've been alone so long I've forgotten how to share a life with someone." "So have I," Catherine said simply. My marriage to Robert was good, but it was also lonely in ways I never admitted. And Victor taught me that sharing a life with the wrong person is worse than being alone. She reached out and took Tom's hand. Her fingers were small and cold in his calloused palm. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Catherine said. I'm asking if you'd be willing to try, to build something new, together. Tom looked down at their joined hands, at this woman who'd walked 3 days on a broken ankle to save her daughter, who'd stood at a window with a pistol in her hands ready to fight for her freedom, who'd survived horrors he could only imagine and still had the courage to hope. I don't deserve this, Tom whispered. Maybe not, but you have it anyway. Catherine squeezed his fingers. Stop arguing and accept it. Despite himself, Tom smiled. Yes, ma'am. From the cabin doorway, Rose called out, does this mean Mr. Tom is staying with us? Or are we staying with Mr. Tom? Catherine laughed, and the sound was like music. Both, sweetheart, we're staying with each other. Good, Rose said with satisfaction. Uncle Samuel says it's about time. He says you've both been lonely long enough. That night, after Rose was asleep, Tom and Catherine sat by the fire talking. Really talking. Not about survival or danger or the immediate future, but about dreams. About the kind of life they wanted to build. This cabin is too small, Catherine said, looking around, for 3 people long term. I know, I've been thinking about that. Tom pulled out a piece of paper covered with rough sketches. There's good land on the rise above here. We could build a real house. 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, room for Rose to grow up. Catherine studied the drawings. You can build this? I'm a coffin maker. Building things is what I do, just usually smaller and for dead people. She laughed at that, then grew serious. What about money? Building a house costs. You've got money now. We have money. If we're doing this, we're doing it together, which means the money belongs to both of us. Tom wasn't comfortable with that, wasn't comfortable with the idea of living off a woman's inheritance. But he also recognized that Catherine was right. If they were building a life together, they needed to actually be partners, not him providing while she depended, but equals. All right, Tom said. We'll use some of the inheritance for the house, but I pull my weight. I'll keep working. Expand beyond just coffins. There's call for furniture, building, carpentry work. I can provide. I know you can. Catherine moved closer until they were sitting shoulder to shoulder. But you don't have to prove anything to me, Tom. You already proved everything that matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals. Tom became aware of Catherine's warmth beside him, of how natural it felt to have her there. How right. Catherine, he said quietly, there's something I need to say. What? Tom took a breath. He wasn't good with words, had never been. But some things needed to be said plainly. I'm falling in love with you. Catherine went very still. Then slowly she turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I know it's too soon, Tom continued. I know you just got freed of one man and probably need time before you even think about another. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. Tom, Catherine said softly, it's not too soon. Maybe it should be. Maybe I should be more careful, more cautious, but I don't want to be. Not anymore. She took his hand again. I'm falling in love with you too. Have been since you chose not to kill Victor. Since you showed me that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty. That power can be used to protect instead of control. Tom felt something break open in his chest. 8 years of ice and numbness cracking apart. He cupped Catherine's face in his hands, rough palms against soft skin. I want to do this right, and he said. Court you properly. Give you time. Make sure you were sure. I'm sure, Catherine. Kiss me, Tom. So he did. Gentle at first, then deeper as she leaned into him. She tasted like hope and new beginnings, and everything good he'd thought he'd lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Catherine rested her forehead against his. I want to marry you, she whispered. Not right away, but soon, when we're ready. I want Rose to have a father who'll teach her to be strong and kind. I want to build that house with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing I chose this, chose you, chose us. Yes, Tom said, because what else was there to say? Yes to all of it. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of planning and healing. News came from Helena that Victor Morrison's trial was concluded. He'd been sentenced to life in prison for the murders of Jonathan Harrison and Robert Morrison. All his assets were seized to pay his gambling debts, which turned out to be substantial. But the Morrison estate, Robert's legitimate business interests, and Rose's inheritance remained intact. Catherine hired a lawyer to sort through the details. The process would take months, but the preliminary figures suggested they'd be comfortable. More than comfortable. Martha became a regular visitor, arriving every few days with food, advice, and the latest gossip from Silver Creek. Through her, Tom and Catherine heard about the Women's Network, the underground system of widows and survivors who helped each other escape abusive situations. We could help, Catherine said one evening, with the money. We could fund safe houses, pay for legal representation, make it easier for women to leave. Martha's eyes lit up. You do that? I know what it's like to be trapped, to think you have no options. If I can help other women escape that, yes, I want to do that. So they did. Catherine donated money to establish a fund for women fleeing abuse. Judge Hartley helped set up the legal framework. Martha coordinated the network of safe houses. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was something. A way to turn suffering into purpose. Rose, meanwhile, thrived. She helped Martha with the chickens, learned to bake bread from Catherine, and spent hours in Tom's workshop learning woodworking. Why do you make coffins? Rose asked one afternoon, watching Tom plane a board smooth. Because people die, and they need somewhere to rest. Does it make you sing, making boxes for dead people? Tom considered this. A month ago, he would have said yes. Would have said that every coffin was a reminder of his own death of the spirit. But now, not as much as it used to, Tom admitted. Used to be I made coffins because I felt more connection to the dead than the living. Now I make them because it's work that needs doing. And because I'm good at it. Will you teach me? To make coffins? To make things. Anything. Papa used to make things, but then he got sick. I miss making things with him. Tom's throat tightened. He set down his tools and knelt beside Rose. I'd be honored to teach you, he said. But Rose, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to replace your papa. Robert was your father. Nothing changes that. I know, Rose said simply. But Uncle Samuel says you can have more than one person who loves you like a father. He says love doesn't run out. It just grows to fit whoever needs it. Tom had to look away, blinking hard. This strange child with her ancient wisdom and her matter-of-fact acceptance of things most adults struggled with. Your Uncle Samuel is a wise man, Tom said finally. He says you are too, just stubborn. Despite himself, Tom laughed. Winter gave way to spring, 4 months after that December confrontation. On a mild April morning with wildflowers beginning to bloom across the valley, Tom and Catherine were married. The ceremony was small, held in the little church in Silver Creek. Martha stood as witness. Judge Hartley officiated. Rose served as flower girl, scattering wildflowers down the aisle with more enthusiasm than precision. Sergeant sat in the front pew, his gray muzzle resting on his paws, watching the proceedings with canine dignity. Tom wore his best clothes, which weren't particularly fine, but were clean and pressed. Catherine wore a simple dress of blue cotton that matched her eyes. No veil, no elaborate ceremony, just two people making promises to each other in front of witnesses. When the minister said they could kiss, Tom cupped Catherine's face in his scarred hands and kissed her gently, thoroughly, like she was precious, like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped asking. The small congregation applauded. Rose cheered. Sergeant's tail thumped against the floor. And somewhere in some place beyond sight but not beyond feeling, Tom sensed Samuel Hart smiling, approving, releasing him from 8 years of guilt to embrace this new life. After the ceremony, there was a small celebration at Martha's house. Cake and coffee and simple conversation. No drinking, no dancing, just community gathering to acknowledge that two broken people had found each other and decided to try being whole together. As the afternoon wore on, Tom found himself standing on Martha's porch, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains. Catherine came to stand beside him, her hand slipping into his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "About Samuel, about how he'd laugh if he could see this. Me married, planning to build a house, becoming a father to his niece. Do you think he can see it?" Tom thought about Rose's visions, about the way she spoke of Samuel like he was standing right beside her, about moments when he'd swear he felt a presence watching over them. "Yeah," Tom said. "I think he can. And I think he's happy. Finally at peace." "Good." Catherine leaned against him. "He deserves peace. And so do you." They stood together as darkness gathered, neither speaking, just being. Together. A year ago, Tom would have said this life was impossible, that he was too broken, too lost, too far gone to find his way back. He would have been wrong. In the weeks following the wedding, they began planning in earnest. Tom sketched house designs by lamplight. Catherine calculated lumber costs and supplies. Rose asked endless questions about where her bedroom would be, whether there'd be room for a doghouse for Sargent. By late April, the first foundation posts were driven into Montana soil. The house rose slowly over the spring and summer. Tom did most of the work himself, but men from Silver Creek came to help with the heavy lifting, the frame raising, the roof. They came because of Catherine's generosity to the Women's Network, because Tom had stood up to Victor Morrison, because in small communities, people remembered who helped and who hurt. Rose was Tom's constant companion during construction. She learned to measure boards, to check for level, to drive nails straight. She was patient and careful, traits unusual in a child her age. But then Rose had always been unusual. "Why do we measure twice?" Tom would ask. "Because wood doesn't grow back," Rose would answer. "And why does that matter?" "Because mistakes have consequences. In building, in life." Tom would nod, satisfied. She was learning more than carpentry. She was learning how to think, how to plan, how to understand that actions had results and care prevented problems. Catherine watched them work together from the porch of the old cabin. She was pregnant now, though barely showing. They hadn't told Rose yet, wanted to wait until they were certain. But Catherine's hand would drift to her stomach sometimes, and her eyes would soften with something between wonder and fear. Another child, a new life, a future Tom had never imagined having. By late summer, the house was finished. 4 bedrooms as planned, a large kitchen with a proper stove, a parlor with windows facing south and west to catch the light, a porch wrapping 3 sides where they could sit on summer evenings and watch the sun set over the valley. It wasn't fancy, no carved banisters or imported fixtures, but it was solid, built to last. Every board measured twice and cut once, every joint fitted carefully. A house built with patience and skill and love. The night they moved in, Tom built a fire in the new fireplace. They ate dinner at the new table he'd made. Then Catherine tucked Rose into bed in her own room, her own bed, for the first time in her life. When Catherine returned to the parlor, Tom was standing at the window, looking out at the old cabin down the hill, the place where all of this had started, where Catherine and Rose had knocked on his door in a blizzard, where he'd found something worth living for again. "We should keep it," Tom said. "The old cabin. Fix it up. Use it for storage or guests or a reminder," Catherine finished, "of where we came from, what we survived." "Yeah." Catherine wrapped her arms around him from behind. For a moment they stood in silence, looking down at the small cabin where everything had begun. Then she took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. Tom froze. "Catherine? I'm pregnant," she said softly. "I wanted to tell you here, where it all started." Tom turned, searching her face. "You're sure?" "The doctor in Silver Creek confirmed it yesterday. About 3 months along, the baby should come in February." Tom felt a swell of emotion so powerful it nearly knocked him over. Joy, terror, overwhelming love for this woman who'd trusted him with her life, her daughter's life, and now a new life they'd created together. "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, watching his face. "I don't have words for what I am," Tom said honestly. "A year ago, I was alone in a cabin measuring my life in coffins built. Now there's you, Rose, a baby coming, a future I'd stopped believing in. I don't know how to hold this much happiness." "One day at a time," Catherine said. "That's how we survived everything else." That's how we'll survive this too. Tom pulled her close, holding her carefully like she might break. I love you, he said into her hair, more than I thought I could love anything. I know, and I love you too. They stood together as night settled over the valley, two people who had found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward light. 1 year to the day after the blizzard that had brought them together, Tom woke before dawn. Catherine slept beside him, her pregnant belly round under the quilts. Down the hall, Rose was sleeping. Sergeant, now 13 and showing his age with more gray in his muzzle and slower movements, was curled at the foot of Rose's bed. Faithful as ever, Tom rose quietly and walked out onto the porch. The pre-dawn air was cold, crisp, tasting of coming winter. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, constant, eternal, indifferent to human struggle and human joy alike. Tom thought about Samuel, about promises made and promises kept, about 8 years of guilt and failure transformed into something else, something good. I did it, Tom said to the darkness, to the stars, to Samuel's memory. Took me longer than it should have. Took a blizzard and a half-frozen child and pure damn luck. But I kept your promise, Samuel. Your sister is safe. Your niece is loved. And I'm alive again. Really alive. For the first time since you died. No answer came. Tom didn't expect one. But he felt, just for a moment, a warmth that had nothing to do with sunrise. A sense of approval, of release, of Samuel Hart finally resting. Thank you, Tom whispered, for everything, for saving my life, for trusting me with your family, for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself. The eastern sky began to lighten, gold edging into gray, a new day beginning. Tom heard movement behind him, turned to see Rose standing in the doorway wrapped in a quilt, her dark hair tangled from sleep. Morning, little one, Tom said. You're up early. Uncle Samuel woke me up. Rose came to stand beside him, and Tom wrapped the quilt more securely around her shoulders. What did he say? Rose was quiet for a moment, listening to something only she could hear. When she spoke, her voice had that distant quality it sometimes took, the voice of someone passing on a message from far away. He says goodbye. Tom's chest tightened. Goodbye? He's leaving now, really leaving. Going to the light where Grandma and Grandpa are waiting, where it's warm and peaceful and no one hurts anymore. Rose looked up at Tom with those ancient, knowing eyes. He says he can finally rest because you kept your promise. He says he's been waiting, watching, making sure you found each other. And now that you have, now that Mama's safe and I'm loved and you're happy, he can go. Tears burned Tom's eyes. He'd known this moment would come, had known Samuel couldn't stay forever, anchored to the living world. But knowing didn't make it easier. Tell him, Tom's voice broke. Tell him I'll take care of them. Always. That's my promise now. Rose smiled. He knows. He says that's what makes you brothers. Not blood, but promises. And he says, she paused listening, he says thank you for trying, for not giving up, for becoming the man he always knew you were. Tom knelt down, putting himself eye level with Rose. Can you tell him I love him? That I miss him every day? He knows that too. Rose reached up and touched Tom's cheek, her small hand gentle. And he loves you. He says you were the best friend he ever had, the best man he ever knew. The sun broke over the horizon, spilling gold across the valley. In that flood of light, Tom felt something release. The last weight of guilt, the last chain of grief. Samuel was leaving, truly leaving, going to whatever peace waited beyond. And Tom was staying, living, building, loving, as it should be. Goodbye, Samuel, Tom whispered. Rest easy, brother. I'll take it from here. Rose's eyes cleared. She blinked, suddenly just a child again. He's gone now, really gone. But he says, she smiled, he says we'll all meet again someday. When it's time, when we're old and ready. He'll be waiting with Grandma and Grandpa and Papa Robert. We'll all be together again. Tom pulled Rose into a hug, holding her tight. This strange, brave child who'd led her mother through a blizzard, who saw the dead and spoke prophecy, who'd become the daughter of his heart, if not his blood. I love you, Rose, Tom said fiercely. You know that? I know, and I love you too, even though. She pulled back, looking at him seriously. Even though you're not my real papa. I'm not replacing him, sweetheart. Robert was your father. I'm just the man who gets to watch you grow up. Rose was quiet for a long moment. For weeks now, she'd called him Mr. Tom, or just Tom. But lately, Tom had noticed her hesitating before saying his name, as if the word didn't quite fit anymore, as if she was searching for something else. Can I call you Papa? She asked finally. Or would that make Papa Robert sad? Or would that make Papa Robert sad? Tom felt his throat close. I think your Papa Robert would want you to be happy, would want you to have someone to call Papa. And if that's me, he had to stop, collect himself. I'd be honored, more than honored. Okay, Rose said simply, then testing it out. Papa Tom? Yeah, sweetheart. I'm cold. Can we go inside? Tom laughed, swept her up, quilt and all, and carried her back into the warm house. Catherine was awake now, making coffee in the kitchen. She looked up as they entered, her face soft with morning light and love. Everything all right? She asked. Everything's perfect, Tom said. Samuel's gone, really gone. At peace, Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Good, he deserves peace, you all do. They ate breakfast together as a family, the three of them, soon to be four. Tom looked around the table and marveled at how much had changed. How much he'd changed. A year ago, he'd been dead inside, building coffins, waiting to die. Now he was building a life. And that life was full of noise and cow and love and hope and all the messy, beautiful complications that came with actually living instead of just existing. After breakfast, Tom went to his workshop. But this time, he wasn't building a coffin. He was making a cradle for the baby that would come in February, his child, his and Catherine's. Rose came with him, as she always did. She handed him tools, asked questions, learned. Papa Tom, she said, will the baby be able to see Uncle Samuel like I can? Tom paused in his work. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. Or maybe your gift is just yours. I hope the baby can see him, even if it's just sometimes. It's nice having family watching over you. Yes, Tom agreed. It is. They worked together in comfortable silence, building something for new life. Not boxes for the dead, but a cradle for the living. That was the difference. That was everything. Tom Brennan had finally stopped being the coffin maker, had finally stopped building monuments to death. Now he was just a man, a husband, a father, a builder of houses and cradles and futures. Now he was alive. And 8 years after Samuel Hart died in his arms, 8 years after a promise made on a battlefield in Virginia, 8 years after Tom thought his life was over, now it was just beginning. Frame narrative returns, Montana, December 1905. Tom finished his story as the fire burned low. His grandson, Samuel Jr., sat at his feet, eyes wide with wonder. So great-uncle Samuel really was a ghost? The boy asked. Your mother says he was, and I learned a long time ago not to argue with her when she speaks of such things. Tom smiled. But ghost or not, Samuel Hart brought your grandmother to me, brought your mother, brought all of you. That's real enough for me. Samuel Jr. was quiet for a moment, processing. Do you still miss him? Great-uncle Samuel? Every day, but not the way I used to. Used to be, missing him hurt like a wound that wouldn't heal. Now it's more like remembering something beautiful that's gone but left something good behind. Grandma, the boy said, and Mama, and me. Exactly. Tom ruffled the boy's hair. You're Samuel Hart's legacy. All of you. He died so I could live, and I lived so you could be born. That's how legacies work. They pass down, person to person, generation to generation. The door opened and Catherine entered, 60 years old now, but still beautiful in Tom's eyes. Behind her came Rose, now 39, with her husband and their other children. Papa, Rose said, you're not filling Samuel's head with ghost stories again, are you? Just telling him about his great-uncle, about promises, about family. Rose smiled and kissed Tom's weathered cheek. That's not a ghost story. That's our story. Same thing sometimes, Tom said. They gathered for dinner, 4 generations around the long table. Tom sat at the head, Catherine at his side. He looked at his family, grown large and loud and full of life, and felt that familiar swell of gratitude. This was the promise fulfilled. Not just finding Catherine, not just keeping Rose safe, but this continuation, this future that stretched beyond him, beyond Catherine, beyond all of them. After dinner, as the family settled in the parlor and the children played by the fire, Tom walked out onto the porch one last time. He was 74 now, old, tired, but content in ways his 42-year-old self could never have imagined. He looked up at the same stars he'd watched with Samuel during the war, the same stars that had wheeled overhead on that blizzard night when everything changed. "Thank you," Tom said to the darkness, to the stars, to Samuel's long-departed spirit, "for the gift, for the chance, for the life you gave me." No answer came. None was needed. Tom Brennan, the man who'd been dead inside for 8 years, was finally, fully, completely alive. And that was enough. That was everything.